The winds of a dying world howled across the shattered hulls of forgotten ships as Nox Rylan trudged through the scrapyard, the scent of rust and decaying metal in the air. His eyes, pale blue and steely, scanned the horizon of twisted wreckage in front of him. This was Shaleheart, the largest junkyard in the Solemn Belt, a forsaken relic where starships went to die. He tightened his grip on the dusty handle of his energy rifle, his worn metallic armor creaking with every step. Nox had seen war, and he had survived it. But the real battle was here, amongst the wreckage where dreams, like the ships, were abandoned and left to rot. His fingers grazed the surface of a half-buried freighter, the insignia of a once legendary fleet barely visible under layers of grime. He stopped and let out a sigh, his worn face lined with the toll of years spent chasing ghosts. Lot 391, he muttered, glancing at his hollow map. This was the place. Then he saw it. Emerging from the dim fog of twisted metal, a massive vessel stood like a decayed monument, the Celestial Siren, a rare multi-phase cruiser class. Once, it had been a shining example of galactic engineering, a ship fit for royalty. Now it was a hollowed-out husk, its engines long silent, its sleek structure faded by years of abandonment. Nox felt a pang of nostalgia. He'd studied this ship back in his youth. It had disappeared years ago, presumed lost during the galactic divide. This wasn't just a scrap heap, he realized. It was the key to something greater. He adjusted the tracking pad in his hand and approached, his mind racing with the possibilities of what he could do with this salvage. He could sell it for a fortune or perhaps even restore it to its former glory. Either way, it was a lifeline, something he could turn into profit or salvation. The airlock hissed open as Nox scanned the ship's clearance codes. He stepped inside, expecting the familiar silence of a derelict ship, but was instead greeted by a low hum. Someone was already here. Looking for something? A voice called from the shadows. Nox froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm, though he kept it holstered. From the shadows emerged a woman, a striking figure draped in tattered clothes, her skin a pale shade of jade, her long white hair flowing like a cascade of moonlight. Her eyes, dark with makeup, were fierce and calculating, her lips curved in a knowing smile. "Who are you?" Nox demanded, his voice low and steady. "My name is Via," she said, her tone casual but her gaze sharp. "And you, Nox Rylan, are trespassing?" Nox's brow furrowed. "I'm not trespassing. I bought this ship. The paperwork's all in order." He waved his data pad at her, showing the registration and legal purchase codes. Via tilted her head, her pale green eyes narrowing. "I don't care about your paperwork. I've been living here for the last 5 years and this is my ship now. So you can either leave or we can talk." Nox studied her for a moment. He was used to hard bargains and difficult people, but something about her presence unsettled him. There was a tension in the air, something unspoken but undeniable. "Look," he said, his patience thinning, "I'm not here for a fight. I came to make a living, not to argue. If you're not interested in selling, then I'll just leave. But if you know something about this ship, then we can negotiate." Her gaze flickered, a brief spark of interest passing over her face. "You really think you're the first person to want to take this ship for a ride, don't you? You think you'll be the one to unlock its secrets?" Nox wasn't sure what she meant, but he knew that this ship was special. Via's expression shifted, a glimmer of something far darker, passing through her eyes. "I can help you fix it," Via said after a long silence. "I know things about this ship that you wouldn't even begin to understand. But understand this, you won't be the one to control it." Nox's mind raced as she spoke. "What are you talking about? This ship's not just a wreck, it's a legend." Her lips curled into a slow smile. "You don't know the half of it. This ship is the last of its kind with the quantum tide matrix intact. This ship can navigate between the stars in ways that other ships can only dream of, because it holds coordinates to places that don't even exist in normal space." Nox felt a chill run down his spine as her words sank in. Places that could change the fate of entire systems. Hidden worlds. Forbidden technologies. Things the powerful had tried to bury. "What's your angle, Via?" Nox asked, his voice tight. "Why not just sell it and take the money?" Her eyes darkened. "Because I'm not here for money. I'm here to find what's been hidden. And you, Nox Rylan, will help me." The words hung heavy between them. He felt the pull of her resolve, but also the gravity of his own choices. If he sided with her, there was no turning back. The Celestial Siren wasn't just a ship. It was a Pandora's box that could rewrite the galaxy's history. "Fine," Nox said, his resolve hardening. "We'll do it your way. But we need to keep our wits about us. People are going to come looking for this ship. And when they do, we'll need a plan. Via gave a faint, knowing smile. You're not as naive as you look. As the days passed aboard the Celestial Siren, Nox and Via worked in tandem, navigating the ship's alien systems, unlocking fragments of data that seemed almost alive with mystery. Yet every step they took toward uncovering its secrets brought them closer to something far more dangerous than either had anticipated. The deeper they delved, the more the ship seemed to come alive with secrets, with ghosts from the past. Then one day the data pad buzzed with an unexpected transmission. It was from the Orion Syndicate. Their message was clear. They knew about the quantum tide matrix and they would stop at nothing to seize it. A plan began to take shape, one that would require more than just a ship and a crew. It would take trust, sacrifice, and the courage to defy those in power. Nox and Via were bound by a shared fate now, one that would lead them to places unknown, places that could either save or destroy everything they held dear. Chapter 2: The Ghosts of the Siren. Nox couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The Celestial Siren, despite its silence, seemed to hum with an unseen presence. As Via worked beside him, her sharp focus never wavered, but Nox couldn't ignore the strange feeling that gripped his chest. The deeper they dug into the ship's systems, the more its secrets clawed at him. And with every hidden layer they uncovered, he found himself questioning just what they were unleashing. Nox, Via's voice broke through his thoughts. He looked up to see her standing near the command console, her hand hovering over a series of glowing symbols on the screen. I found something unusual. What do you mean? Nox approached cautiously, his eyes narrowing as he observed the data on the screen. There, etched into the ship's central navigation matrix, were coordinates, hidden within layers of code so tightly encrypted that only the ship's AI had access to it. But it wasn't just any set of coordinates. The symbols were archaic, a forgotten language, one that Nox couldn't place, but it felt familiar. Felt wrong. I've seen these symbols before, he muttered, leaning in closer. They're old. Older than anything I've encountered in my travels. Via studied him, her dark eyes glinting with curiosity. I knew you'd recognize it. The ship's quantum tide matrix is a relic not just of the past but of something much older, something long buried. Nox turned to face her, his brow furrowing. What are you talking about? You said the matrix had coordinates to hidden places, but now you're saying it's connected to something ancient? Via nodded slowly as if weighing her words. This matrix doesn't just navigate space. It navigates time. These coordinates, they're not places in the galaxy. They're places in the past. Ancient locations where civilizations left behind their most dangerous secrets. Nox's stomach tightened. You're saying these coordinates could take us back in time? No, she replied, her voice colder than before. We can't go back. But we can unlock the past, find it. And those who control the matrix will hold the power to rewrite history. A sudden flash of understanding crossed Nox's mind. The Syndicate's interest wasn't about treasure, about money, or even about power over the galaxy. It was about control of history itself. We need to stop them, Nox said, his voice low, intense. They'll use the Matrix to destroy everything that stands in the way of their agenda. Via was silent for a moment. Then she turned, her gaze fierce. And that's exactly why we need to understand it before they do. If we can decode these coordinates before they reach us, we can use them. Not just to hide from them, but to strike first. And if we're lucky, we might find something that gives us the upper hand. Nox took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their predicament settle over him like a shroud. He was no stranger to risk, but this was different. This wasn't just survival, it was a fight for the future. For the galaxy itself. But Via, she was something else. There was something about the way she spoke of the Matrix, the way her eyes sparkled with a dangerous hunger, that made him uneasy. Nox didn't know if he could trust her, but he had no choice. Her knowledge of the ship, and the Matrix, was too valuable to ignore. I'll help you unlock it, Nox said, his voice firm. But there are conditions. Via raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Conditions? Nox stood tall, his posture resolute. We do this my way. No more secrets. No more running. If we're going to face the Syndicate, we do it as a team. And we don't go after anything that risks tearing the fabric of reality apart. Via gave him a half-smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. You think you're the only one who's trying to hold on to reality? Don't fool yourself, Nox. I've already made my peace with the consequences of what comes next. Before he could respond, the ship trembled, a low, ominous rumble that shook the walls. The lights flickered, and the hum of the engine seemed to vibrate with a strange energy. Nox's hand instinctively reached for his rifle, his senses on high alert. Did you do that? He asked, looking at Via, whose expression had gone pale. She shook her head, her lips tight with tension. No. Something triggered the ship's defense systems. Nox cursed under his breath. The Syndicate. They must have tracked our signal. They know where we are. The lights flickered again and the ship's internal alarm blared. Code red. Intruder alert, a mechanical voice echoed through the corridors. Via's eyes widened. They're already here. Before Nox could react, the comms panel beeped, and a distorted voice crackled through the static. This is Captain Valen of the Orion Syndicate. You are in possession of what belongs to us. Surrender the ship and you may leave with your lives. Resist and we will destroy you. The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving only the sound of Nox's heavy breathing. His grip on his rifle tightened. Get ready, he said to Via, his voice cold. This isn't over. Nox moved quickly, pulling Via toward the control room. The Celestial Siren was a maze of corridors and forgotten decks, but Nox knew the ship's layout better than most. It was old, worn down, but it was still a weapon. And if the Syndicate thought they could just waltz in and take what was theirs, they had another thing coming. They're not getting this ship, Nox muttered under his breath as he powered up the weapon systems. Via's eyes flickered with concern. Nox, there's more at stake than just this ship. If they get their hands on the quantum tide matrix... I know, he interrupted, his voice tense. But I won't let them control it. I won't let them control us. As the engines roared to life and the ship's old systems hummed, Nox prepared for the fight that was coming. But a nagging thought stayed with him, a suspicion that the Syndicate wasn't their only problem. There was something Via wasn't telling him. And as the ship's dark corridors filled with the buzz of incoming Syndicate forces, Nox realized the true stakes of their mission, not just to escape or survive, but to uncover the truth buried deep within the Celestial Siren's haunted hull. And time was running out. Chapter 3, Shadows and Echoes. Nox's fingers flew over the control panel, his heart racing. The Celestial Siren groaned beneath him, its long dormant systems coming to life with an unholy screech. The ship hadn't been in combat mode in years, but the old girl was still formidable. His eyes flicked to the dark, twisting corridors on the ship's schematics, showing every potential point of entry. If the Syndicate was making their move, they'd be here soon. We need to lock down the lower decks, Nox said, his voice tight. They'll come from below. Via nodded, her pale green skin glowing faintly under the low red lighting of the control room. Her focus was sharp, but her eyes never strayed far from him, as if she was expecting something he couldn't see. Nox spared her a glance. He knew she wasn't just a mechanic, not just a traveler. The tension in her body was evident now more than ever. She wasn't just scared of the Syndicate. There was something more. I'll take care of the aft, Via said, moving toward a hatchway that led to the cargo hold. You handle the rest. Wait, Nox caught her wrist before she could vanish into the shadows. What is it you're not telling me? Her eyes locked onto his, cold and unreadable, a mask of composure. For a long moment she said nothing, then she sighed, glancing down at his hand around her wrist. It was a brief contact, but it held weight. You really want to know everything now? Nox's lips pressed into a hard line. I've seen enough to know this ship is no ordinary relic. The Syndicate isn't just after the Matrix. They're after something else. And you know what it is. Via met his gaze, her expression softening, but only slightly. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. I never wanted you involved in this, Nox. I didn't want you to know. He clenched his jaw. Then why tell me now? Her hand slid from his grip and she stepped back, pulling her cloak tighter around her. Because, she began, her voice quiet but fierce, they're already here. And I can't keep running from my past anymore. Before Nox could respond, the ship's hull rattled with a sharp bang, followed by a series of thuds echoing through the corridors. The Syndicate had made their move. I'll deal with them, Nox growled, turning toward the aft control center, but Via's voice stopped him. No, she said, her tone final. This is my fight now. You'll be better off keeping the Syndicate off my tail. I'll deal with the rest. Deal with the rest? Nox repeated, disbelief creeping into his voice. Are you telling me you plan on facing them alone? Via turned back to him, her expression unreadable. They'll never stop hunting me, Nox. I've been running for too long. But you, she hesitated, glancing over at him, you have a chance. You can still walk away from this. Take the Matrix, sell it to the highest bidder, get out of this mess. Nox's stomach twisted. Walk away. Was that even possible anymore? There was no walking away when you were already this deep. Not for him, not for her. I don't run, Via, he said, stepping closer, his voice firm. You don't get to face them alone. Whatever's haunting you, I'm here. We face this together. For the briefest of moments, something flickered in her eyes. Vulnerability, maybe. But it was gone before Nox could fully catch it. She nodded, almost imperceptibly, and then turned away. Stay close. Don't get yourself killed. Nox watched her disappear into the dark corridor, the sound of her boots echoing in the distance. A deep pit of uncertainty gnawed at him. She was hiding something big. But if he could keep her alive long enough, maybe she'd finally tell him the truth. The ship's comms crackled, and the Syndicate's voice came through once more, cutting through the tension like a knife. You're not getting away, Captain. The sound of boots, dozens of them, pounded in the distance, approaching the entrance to the lower decks. Nox's heart raced. There was no more time for questions. He had to move. Grabbing his rifle, Nox sprinted down the narrow hallway, towards the defensive positions on the lower levels. The ship was a labyrinth, and the Syndicate would be closing in on every exit. The Celestial Siren had once been a vessel of grand potential, but now, it felt like a haunted relic, surrounded by ghosts. Nox could hear the familiar whirring of weapons powering up, the faint sound of footsteps in the ventilation system. They were everywhere. Nox ducked into a small alcove, listening intently. The Syndicate had a reputation for being merciless, but they weren't expecting the ship's old systems to be reactivated. Nox's fingers danced over the security panel, locking down the passageways and setting traps in the critical choke points. He paused, listening for any signs of movement. Then a cold voice broke through his comms. We know where you are, Nox. It was Captain Valen's voice again. The Syndicate leader. His voice was mocking, dripping with arrogance. I think it's time you realize just how much you're in over your head. Nox clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a fight for survival. The Syndicate wasn't after just the Matrix anymore. They wanted everything. The hum of the ship's weapons systems resonated in Nox's bones as he prepared for the inevitable. Every part of him was ready. He wasn't just defending the ship now. He was protecting something far more valuable, the truth. Suddenly, a sharp explosion ripped through the corridor ahead. The hull of the Siren cracked, and a cloud of sparks shot out from the blast point. Nox's heart skipped a beat. They've breached the lower decks. He darted toward the breach, but someone, caught his eye. Via stood at the edge of the darkened hallway, her silhouette sharp against the flashing alarms. She was watching him, her posture tense like a wolf poised to strike. Her eyes burned with a quiet fury, and she seemed to be waiting for something. Via? Nox shouted, but her gaze didn't waver. The sudden realization hit him. This wasn't just her fight. It was her reckoning. As the walls began to shake and the Syndicate's forces descended upon them, Nox knew there was no turning back. What happened next, what they uncovered here, would change everything. And as the doors of the cargo hold slammed open with a deafening screech, Nox finally understood the price of truth. It wasn't just his life that was on the line. It was all of history. Chapter 4, The Price of Truth. The blast had torn through the ship's hull like paper, sending shudders deep into the heart of the Celestial Siren. Nox's boots slammed against the metal floor as he sprinted down the corridor, heart hammering, each breath sharper than the last. The ship groaned under the pressure of the breach, the air thick with smoke and the acrid scent of burning circuits. He could hear the heavy footsteps of Syndicate soldiers closing in from both sides. But it was Via who filled his mind. She was still in the cargo hold, alone, facing something far more dangerous than Syndicate soldiers. Nox reached the sealed blast doors that led to the hold, his hand hovering over the manual override. The ship was locked down tight, but not tight enough. He had only one chance to get to her before they did. His hand shook as he activated the control, and the doors slowly began to slide open with a low, grinding sound. The moment they were wide enough for him to slip through, Nox charged forward, rifle raised, his senses stretched to their limits. The cargo hold was dimly lit, save for the flickering emergency lights that cast long shadows along the walls. But Nox barely noticed any of it. He only had eyes for Via. She stood at the far end of the room, her back to him, her pale green skin glowing faintly in the half-light. She was facing the massive central vault, the place where the quantum matrix was stored, the very thing that had led to this moment, to all of it. She didn't hear him approach. Her posture was tense, like a taut string about to snap. Her white hair shimmered as it shifted in the cold, and the dark makeup around her eyes made her look like something out of a dream, fierce, untouchable, and so distant. Nox stepped closer, keeping his voice low. Via? She stiffened but didn't turn. Her voice was strained as if forced through a clenched jaw. You shouldn't have followed me. You really thought I'd let you face this alone? Nox's words were thick with emotion. He didn't know why, but the realization hit him like a freight train. What the hell is going on with you, Via? She inhaled deeply and finally she turned to face him. Her face was stoic, but there was something else, something hidden behind the cold mask. You don't understand, Nox. I'm not just running from them. I've been running from everything. Nox stepped forward, his mind racing. What are you talking about? What's really going on here? Her eyes met his, and in them he saw something raw, a vulnerability, a pain so deep it nearly shattered the barrier she'd built around herself. Via swallowed hard. You're right. The Syndicate doesn't just want the Matrix. They want me because of what I know, what I've seen. Nox's heart stopped. What do you mean? She took a step closer, her voice barely more than a whisper. This ship, Nox, it's not just a relic. It's a key. A key to unlocking something no one should ever find. Nox's pulse quickened. The air felt thick like it was closing in on him. A key to what? Via's gaze hardened and she stepped back, holding her ground. To the Eclipse Codex. The Eclipse Codex? Nox repeated. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't quite place it. It was a legend, a myth among the stars. A supposed collection of ancient knowledge lost to time, hidden away by an extinct race known only as the Eclipse. A race said to have unlocked the deepest secrets of the universe before vanishing into obscurity. If the Syndicate gets their hands on it, Via continued, her voice firm, they'll be unstoppable. Could change everything. They could control everything. Nox's mind raced, but a cold dread settled in his gut. You're saying the Matrix contains coordinates to this codex? To a lost civilization? Via nodded, her eyes darkening with a mixture of fear and defiance. Not just coordinates. The Matrix holds the key to accessing the codex itself. I've been decrypting it for years, trying to piece it together, but I've barely scratched the surface. If they get to it first, she stopped herself, unable to finish the thought. And you've been hiding here all this time because of this? Nox's voice was thick with disbelief. This is why the Syndicate is hunting you? She nodded again. They've known for months. They just didn't know where I'd hidden the Matrix. She shot him a look, her eyes narrowed. Until you bought the ship. Nox's head spun. The past few days had been a whirlwind, danger, deception, betrayal. But this was something else entirely. He'd been thrust into a war for the fate of the galaxy, and Via had been at the center of it all. You don't get it, Via continued, her eyes fierce. I can't just walk away from this, Nox. The Syndicate doesn't care about the Matrix, they care about the power it holds. They'll burn this galaxy down to get it. I can't let that happen. Nox stepped forward, his heart pounding. So, you're saying you've been running not because they want you dead, but because you're the only one who can stop them? Via's gaze softened just for a moment. I didn't choose this, Nox. I never wanted this burden. But I can't just sit back and let them win. A voice cut through the tension in the room like a blade. And you won't have to. Nox whirled around, his hand reaching for his weapon. But before he could react, the doors to the hold slammed open, and a figure stepped forward, silhouetted in the flashing red lights. A man. Tall, broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath a sleek, black helmet with a crimson visor. Captain Valen, Via muttered, her voice cold. Nox's eyes locked onto the Syndicate leader. The air seemed to grow heavier with every passing second. Valen had finally arrived. I must admit I'm impressed, Valen said, his voice smooth, almost patronizing. You managed to elude us for longer than I expected, Via. But you're out of time now. Hand over the Matrix. Now. Via stepped in front of Nox, her body a shield. You won't get it. Not from me. Valen's gaze flicked from her to Nox, calculating. You've made a mistake, Captain. This doesn't have to end badly for you. Just give me the Matrix and I'll make sure you walk away, alive. Nox's hand tightened around the hilt of his weapon, but he knew better than to act rashly. There was something more to this standoff, something that felt like it was building to an inevitable conclusion. Via's voice cut through the tension. You think I'm just going to hand it over? You don't know who you're dealing with? I think I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Valen said coldly. The only question is, will you choose to live, or will you die for a cause that was never yours to begin with? Nox could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. This was more than just a standoff. It was the beginning of something much larger, something that would change the galaxy forever. He glanced at Via, seeing the resolve in her eyes, the same determination that had drawn him in from the start. They were in this together now, for better or worse. And there was no turning back. Make your move, Valen, Nox said, his voice steady. But know this, whatever happens here, it's not just your fate on the line. It's all of ours. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The silence that followed Nox's words hung in the air like a fragile thread, poised to snap at the slightest movement. Valen didn't flinch. His crimson visor remained locked on Via, his posture unwavering, like a predator waiting for its prey to make the first mistake. "You're running out of time, Via," Valen said, his voice as cold as the steel around them. "We both know how this ends. You can't fight an entire fleet." Via's eyes burned with defiance. She didn't move an inch. "I've survived worse than you, Valen. I'll survive this." Nox shifted his weight, his fingers still tight around his weapon. The tension in the room was palpable, and the hum of the Celestial Siren's failing systems added an eerie undertone to the standoff. He glanced at Via, trying to gauge her next move. He didn't know what she was planning, but he trusted her. "Give it up," Valen continued, his voice mocking. "You can't outrun us forever. The Matrix will be mine." Via's lips curled into a small, bitter smile. "You think you're the only one who knows how to use this ship? This isn't just about the Matrix anymore. It's about control. And you don't have it." Nox's heart skipped a beat as Via activated a sequence on her wristband. The walls of the cargo hold hummed with a sudden surge of energy, and the overhead lights flickered before going completely dark. The emergency red lights flared to life, casting an eerie glow on their faces. Valen growled under his breath. "You've sealed your fate, Via." But then Nox saw it, the momentary hesitation in Valen's stance. He knew something Valen didn't. This wasn't just a standoff. It was a trap. "Nox," Via whispered, barely audible, "move." Nox acted on instinct. He dived to the side, rolling behind a crate just as a barrage of gunfire erupted from Valen's side. The Syndicate leader had anticipated an attack, but he hadn't anticipated Nox's speed. Via was already several steps ahead. The door to the cargo hold suddenly slammed shut with a deafening clang, sealing them off from Valen and his men. The room fell into silence again, save for the sounds of rapid breathing and the sharp clink of Nox's boots hitting the floor. "What the hell was that?" Nox breathed, his pulse racing. "That was me buying us some time," Via said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "He's not as smart as he thinks he is." Nox's eyes widened as he realized what she'd done. "You've locked us in here. With him out there." She smiled darkly. "No. I locked the ship down. Valen doesn't have access to the systems anymore. He can't use the docking bays, can't send his men through the corridors. Not without the codes." Nox shook his head in disbelief. "You changed the codes?" Via's smile deepened. "I didn't just change the codes. I reversed them. For the first time in months, I have complete control of the ship." Nox's gaze softened, a mix of admiration and unease. That's risky, Via." She gave a short laugh. "Risk is my middle name." The sudden burst of static from Nox's comms interrupted their exchange. A voice came through, harsh and panicked. "Nox, do you copy? This is Cadra. We've got a serious problem." Nox's fingers instinctively went to his comms unit, his pulse racing once more. "Cadra, report. What's going on?" The transmission was broken, but the voice came through again, distorted and crackling. "Syndicate, more ships, incoming." The transmission cut off abruptly. Nox cursed under his breath. "We don't have much time." Via was already moving, her eyes flashing with determination. "Let's get to the bridge. We need to lock this ship down before they board us." Nox's thoughts raced as he followed her through the narrow corridors of the Celestial Siren. Their footsteps echoed in the metal hallways, a constant reminder of the danger lurking outside. He trusted Via with his life, but the gravity of their situation was becoming painfully clear. The Syndicate wasn't going to let them escape again. They reached the bridge in record time. Nox watched as Via went to work, her fingers flying over the control panel, the ship's systems responding to her commands with an ease that spoke of months of intimate knowledge. "What's the status?" Nox asked, eyes scanning the viewports for any sign of approaching ships. "They're almost here," Via muttered, her brow furrowed as she worked. "But if I can get this last sequence online, we'll be able to jump before they have a chance to react." Nox stepped closer, his pulse hammering. "We don't have a choice, do we?" Via didn't look at him. "No, we don't." Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, throwing both of them off balance. A siren began to wail in the distance, followed by the unmistakable sound of explosions rocking the hull. "They're boarding us," Nox growled, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. Via's hands remained steady on the controls. "Get to the docking bay. We're taking the Siren, whether they want us to or not. Nox nodded and ran, but as he reached the hallway, a final explosion rocked the ship, sending him tumbling into the wall. The bridge doors slammed shut behind him, locking Via inside. His comms crackled again, and this time it wasn't Kadra. The voice was cold and unmistakable. Nox, Valen's voice purred through the static. This is where it ends. Your little escape? Over. Nox's heart pounded as he scrambled to his feet. He knew what was coming, and he had no idea how to stop it. The door to the docking bay slid open, but Nox froze as the shadow of Valen's men flooded into view, blocking his escape. Every exit was sealed. For a split second he felt the full weight of the universe pressing down on him. He glanced up at the flickering lights above him, hearing the sounds of Via working furiously to unlock the final sequence. The pressure was suffocating. And then, through the chaos, Nox's eyes locked on the last, desperate solution. He grabbed a nearby pulse grenade, tossing it in the direction of the Syndicate soldiers, just as the entire docking bay shuddered with a deep, bone-rattling vibration. Go, Via, Nox whispered as the grenade exploded in a blinding flash. In the aftermath, the ship lurched forward. He didn't know where they were going, but he knew one thing: they were leaving the Syndicate behind. Somewhere in the deep void, Nox heard Via's voice in his ear. I hope you know what you're doing, Nox. He smiled, his voice steady. I'm just following your lead, Via. Just following your lead. The Celestial Siren shot forward into the unknown, its engines roaring through the silence of space, carrying its passengers, alive but forever changed, into the darkness.